What is up, my Squirtleites? It is I, your king, welcoming you back to more Let's Play Destiny 2. I used the Up and Up adventure to get here because we're going to have a discussion in this episode. And if you are only worried about the story progression, feel free to turn this episode off. You don't have to watch this one. You can wait for the next one. We're going to go after all of the region chests. We're going to start going after all the region chests anyway that are around the EDZ, Titan, you know, all the planets we've been to thus far. Stuff like that. And moons, of course. So, but in this episode, I have, well, a bone to pick. Very important bone to pick. And I just want you guys to know that what I'm about to show you is the single biggest insult that Bungie has ever made to its own lore and story that is in Destiny. And that is right, if I can get up here, right here. Do you see that? That is a body. Now, who does that body belong to, you might ask? Well, okay, I'm going to go over the lore a little bit. Back when the city was still under siege by the Fallen, there were many great guardians that assisted in the battles. In those battles, there were hunters such as Anna Bray, who could wield a golden gun as if it was an extension of her own arm, and basically use it ad infinitum. There was Osiris, a warlock who could simulate time and create several different versions of himself, so he could be in several places at once on the battlefield, dealing plenty of damage where it needed to be to the Fallen. And then there was a Titan known as Saint-14, a Titan that was so devastating he would lead one-man crusades against all of the enemies of the city, destroying them despite the many repeated warnings of his mentor, the Speaker, as well as other members of the Vanguard. But he would only do it for the good of the city, and he would always come back victorious. In Destiny 1 and Destiny 2, Saint-14 actually has an exotic helmet that we are able to equip that blinds enemies that wander into our Ward of Dawn. This helmet actually has a dent on it, or an indentation in it, that was made when Saint-14 fought what I believe was a Fallen Baron, which is only one step below the Kells, their strongest, the strongest members of the entire Fallen House. It actually might have been a Kell, but I believe it was a Baron. And he killed the thing by headbutting its skull so hard that it caved its own skull in, thus creating that dent. Saint-14 is kind of a badass, if that wasn't already obvious based on the things I just told you. He was kind of an amazing, heroic character, and him and Osiris were sort of friends, but also constantly at odds, because Saint-14 was very loyal to the city. And while Osiris was incredibly intelligent and Saint-14 respected him in that, Osiris went against a lot of the principles that the Speaker taught and was very much questioning of the things the Speaker said, which was, well, and has been for a long time, taboo in the city. Only now in Destiny 2 is it finally okay now that the Speaker is gone. So this is why Osiris was cast out. Now, before Osiris could obviously go and meddle in more affairs, the Speaker suggested, or Saint-14 suggested to the Speaker that he pursue Osiris. And so he did, pursuing Osiris into the very Vex Gates here on Mercury. And well, according to Bungie, as of Destiny 2, if I can get back up here again. Apparently I can't. This is kind of actually hard to get to. Saint-14 died. That is Saint-14 right there. That is an indisputable fact that it is Saint-14, because by all intents and purposes, this image right here shows that whoever is buried here, or whoever is floating here, actually died with honor, and not just with honor to us, but to the Vex. Whoever is placed here was given his own burial tomb, and to impress the Vex to such a degree that they are willing to give you your own tomb rather than erase you from history, which is what they do with pretty much everything else. That's pretty damn impressive. Only Saint-14 is enough of a badass to have done that. And he is the only character we know that, well, followed Osiris into these different Vex Gates, aside from the crazy people that follow Osiris, like Brother Vance, but they don't count, and let's be honest, they're obviously not going to impress the Vex all that much. So that's undisputably Saint-14 in there. Now, why is this a big insult to Destiny? Well, Osiris, first of all, was at least given an entire campaign where we got to know him. It was poorly written, it was poorly handled, and it was poorly directed, but he was at least given his own campaign. Anna Bray, well, I don't really want to spoil too much, but she actually gets a very good send-off as well, and we'll actually be getting into that later. and I don't want to spoil anything just yet, but we'll be getting into her as well. I would go out on a limb and say she is to hunters what Osiris is to warlocks, and what Saint-14 is to titans. Saint-14, we get an Easter egg that took the community 3 days to find, which for in Destiny timeline, Destiny community timeline, that is a very long time to do. Just in a peephole in a kind of backwoods, shitty little adventure. That's all we got for what is supposed to be the most badass Titan of all time. And you might say, well, at least they're honoring him with that symbolism. Okay, first of all, how is anyone supposed to know that? How is anyone supposed to understand what this means? How is anyone who isn't already versed in the lore, who doesn't know who Saint-14 is, or at least knows the name but doesn't know the ramifications of his actions, how does anybody know that that's who this is? You have to do some severe theory crafting and put all of the pieces together to be convinced that it is Saint-14. And we know it is Saint-14. You're actually able to get a shotgun of his later, as well as a ship, that all but confirms that that is indeed Saint-14. But that's it. That's all we get. And you know what, Bungie? And I know that, okay, they've already heard this from plenty of other people, and I think that they understand this now, but I want to let you guys know that that right there is incredibly offensive to the lore. It's one thing to tell the story very poorly, which is something they've always done. It's one thing to have very bad voice acting, but the lore for Destiny is extremely strong. It builds up these legends and these tales. There are so many good legends and tales that are told in the Destiny universe, many of which are told in the flavor text of guns, many of which are told throughout missions, or at least hinted at in missions. And Bungie, in fact, just the other day, although it might be out by the time this video goes up, announced that a Grimoire anthology book, something I would highly recommend if you're interested in the lore of Destiny, like I am, is going to be released on hardcover. And with all of those things in mind, because people love the lore of this game, the fact that a character as important to the lore as Saint-14 has been given such a weak send-off is insulting. It is frankly not okay. And you might say, well, that's very entitled of you to say. But here's the thing, okay? And I'm not about to say, well, the lore and the story of Destiny is mine because I love it. Anyone who has that mentality of over time the story and lore or whatever becomes the fans, that's actually a very toxic mentality to have. That's not the mentality I have about this. No, the mentality I have is that this right here was undeniable and indisputable proof that Bungie does not know what it's doing with its own universe. The fact that they were able to give us... This is a hero in the Destiny timeline that we are supposed to look up for. This guy right here, just floating there off in the distance that we can barely make out. He is a hero. He has become legend, which is the entire point of the game. He is probably the single best example of a character that was exactly like our character in the games, that is able to take down entire armies, destroy worlds, destroy gods, and do all of the badass things that our character does in this game. And that's what he's been relegated to. And if you don't think that is the tiniest bit insulting, I don't really know what to tell you. I feel like that is just a big slap in the face to the community, but also to the lore that Bungie has crafted. And you know what? The reason I think it's a slap in the face is not because I feel like the lore or the story of Destiny belongs to me. It's a slap in the face because Bungie is better than that. They have always been better than that. Curse of Osiris was absolutely the biggest low that Bungie has ever sunk to as a company. By far, it is their lowest point in company history. People thought it was bad when Destiny 1 came out. People thought it was bad, as soon as the Halo franchise was over. But Curse of Osiris is a culmination of every single thing that Bungie has done wrong in their deal with the devil, known as Activision, combined with possibly the laziest storytelling, the poorest writing, and honestly, a big slap into their face to their wonderful, wonderful art directors that have made this beautiful aesthetic that we got to see throughout this DLC. They're the only people, I would say, the art team, that has always been on point with Destiny. And the fact that every other area is lacking is just a downright shame to them and their efforts. It really is. And to see things like that, that was actually made by good writers, good lore crafters, who are actually no longer a part of Bungie, unfortunately, and to all of the people that have spent hours, days, weeks, months dissecting the lore of this game because it is so rich and so deep, and to relegate your character to something like that is just not okay. to do what you did to Osiris and Sagira. Osiris, again, who's supposed to be the most badass warlock, who we barely ever get to see throughout his entire campaign, who barely makes a mark outside of the final mission in the game, and who basically spends the entire final cutscene of the game telling us how great we are, as if this game needed to suck our collective dicks anymore. It's just insulting. It's insulting because it completely destroys everything that this game and this series has tried to build up. In things like The Taken King, in things, where the story was actually at its best. Trying to build up these wonderful characters. And you know what? Bungie is making strides to improve. They've already heard everything I just said from the community. The community has told them all of the things I just said. But I want you guys who are watching this to understand that as well, because I never want this to happen again or ever be considered acceptable. Curse of Osiris should never happen again in the Destiny franchise. And if it does, well, it's absolutely unacceptable. It was unacceptable the first time, but it's beyond that if it ever happens again. This series better never sink to this low again. Because that's all it had going for it, was the aesthetics. Every single other thing in this entire DLC was a letdown. Everything in it was a disappointment, and everything in it was, well, I guess you could say, and I hate to use this term because I really do think, and I know I've already used it already, but I think it is a little bit overdramatic, but it was a slap in the face. The fact that microtransactions were doubled down on and made worse. The fact that the expansion was unable to justify itself with additional content. The fact that Bungie added less into this expansion than they did in previous expansions, such as Dark Below and House of Wolves, saying that they could justify it in other ways and failing to do so. Giving us a raid lair instead of an entire raid, or an entire other activity like Prison of Elders. It's not okay, and I never want it to happen again. Now, there's a bright side. Warmind is coming up next. And Warmind is, I'm going to say it right off the bat, a much better DLC than Curse of Osiris is. It's still not perfect. It still has a lot of problems, and I will be addressing those as we get into them. But it's a step in the right direction. It is a step, or at least it's a step in the right direction from rock bottom, which is where Curse of Osiris is at. And we're going to be getting into that very, very soon, and I'm excited for that. But with the Forsaken DLC, which, let's be honest, we all knew was going to be a much better step in the right direction, it looks like things are getting even better. And I can't wait to see it, because this kind of stuff right here, this view, shouldn't be going to waste. It's not okay. This gun should not be going to waste. This feeling of empowerment should not be going to waste. And Bungie, I respect all of you, the people that work at your company, way too hard, way too much to expect anything less. Thank you all so very much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.